Okay, methyl not testosterone acetate, or ment, trestolone as it is more commonly referred to. Now this stuff's been around since the 1960s, but of recent it has suddenly jumped into the forefront with many UGLs starting to produce a version. It gained popularity again within medical studies about 5-6 years ago, I think, and has been looked at an alternative to testosterone in TRT. Now, its anabolic to androgenic ratio is 2300 to 650. And bear in mind, tren is 500 to 500, and test is 100 to 100. So straight away you can see that this stuff is very, very anabolic. In other words, it's very effective at building muscle mass without masses and masses of androgenic sites. Half-life 8-12 hours, because it's an acetate. No studies showing detection time at the moment, because it's not been popular in use. There's no real relevant information on how long it's detectable for. But I would argue as an acetate, you'd be looking at 3 months to be safe. Doses, anything from 30 mg to 200 mg. And it's nandrolone based. Now, originally its prescription drug was available as a gel and as an oral. What they found with the oral was assimilation was very, very poor. Now, ment's quite unique, you see, because it doesn't bind with SHBG, sexual binding globule. So, what that means is you end up with more free-flowing hormone in your bloodstream. Now, studies have shown and reported this stuff to be between 10 to 23 times more anabolic than testosterone, yet only 3 to 6 times more androgenic. So we get a shitload of growth, we're not a shitload of size. Primate studies have been a bit more conservative, up to 10 times more anabolic and only 2 times androgenic. Either way, that's still pretty good news. Now, it has a very high binding affinity to the receptor. Now, in the ladder of binding affinity, trenbolone sits at the top, followed by nandrolones. Trestolone sits in between. So it is higher binding affinity than nandrolones, but not quite as much as trenbolone, which is one of the reasons why this stuff is so potent and so effective. And obviously with the low androgens, it doesn't have masses of side effects. Now it's used as a contraception and it's used for TRT. It is worth mentioning at this point that this stuff is reported to be 20 times more harsh on shutdown than testosterone. But it's also been shown to have very little impact on the prostate. Now, from a TRT point of view, studies have shown doses as little as 3.5 milligrams per week have been as effective as 200 milligrams of test. So you start getting a picture of how good this shit is. Now, it does aromatize, it does convert to estrogen, but it converts to a synthetic estrogen known as 7-alpha-methyl estradiol. Can be controlled, regular SERMs or AIs, normal estrogen management will be perfectly adequate for controlling this stuff. Now, there is a study that shows that it has bound with the progesterone receptor, but it's when cabergoline and AIs were introduced in this study, it had showed no change of levels. So it does have an effect on progesterone. It's not one that we can regulate with Caber, and to be honest, we don't really at this point know what mechanism is at work there. It's only one study, so obviously we're not sure. And definitely there needs to be more research there. Now, can't be converted by 5-alpha reductase, so there's no conversion to DHT as such. So another reason why it stays so potent. Obviously, it will affect lipids like all steroids do, so that's something you need to really keep an eye on. But generally it's regarded as not being hepatotoxic, so it's not toxic to the liver or kidneys. And that's really where we are. There's very little study regarding the potency of this stuff with shutdown. Without doubt, a PCT is going to be needed. There's no studies of superpharmacological doses, so when we're showing very heavy shutdown at TRT doses, you've got to have some concern as to how damaging this stuff's going to be at bigger doses. So that's definitely worth bearing in mind. That, you know, it is very good, it is very effective, and from a size point of view, it is relatively safe. But we could have some serious recovery issues. Okay, so that's it for that. I've still got a stat load of drugs to get through, and I will keep plodding on. I know I've been a bit slack with the videos just late. Unfortunately, I've just been very, very busy. But I'll get back on top. Okay, so thank you for your time, and good night.